Good morning, everyone. Oh, it's so good to see so many people here joining us today. I'm very excited that this webinar is being very popular. So welcome and good morning. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge a traditional custodian on the land in which SCOA operates, the Ngunnawal people, and recognize any other people or families with connection to the land of the ACT and surrounding region. We pay our respects to the elder past, present, and future, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. As we're meeting online, we also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands from which we are participating or joining. We recognize the enduring connection of First Nation people to land, water, and culture across the country. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you will get a lot from what we're going to be hearing today from the Working Group 2 and Working Group 3 presentation. But before we get started and learn about the great work of those working groups, I might start by providing kind of a brief overview of the Road to Belonging strategy and the work that has been done so far. So in early 2022, SCOA led the development of a collective strategy for the Australian salmon sector. The strategy was co-designed in partnership with local and national salmon organizations, big bodies, government department, and individuals with lived experience of migration. The strategy brings the sector together to achieve a common goal, an Australia where all people of migrant and refugee background belong, thrive, and experience fulfilling lives. The Road to Belonging is a 5-year strategy, and it's currently in its second phase of implementation. While it's structured around this timeline, it's also intended to be a long-term guiding vision for the sector. The implementation of the strategy is being driven by SCOA working in collaboration with member organizations, but also other stakeholders. It was developed collectively and it's also being implemented collectively. To put this strategy into action, SCOA established a governance group and 6 working groups, each aligned with a key focus area. Working Group 1 is looking at empowered settlement journeys, Working Group 2 at partnering with migrant and refugee communities, Working Group 3, cross-sector collaboration, Working Group 4, working on workforce and organizational capacity, Working Group 5, working on monitoring, evaluation, and data, and Working Group 6, working on research and systems change. Each working group is chaired by a person with a particular interest in that area, and it includes between 10 to 25 individuals who are committing to driving change on that topic. Each of the working group has a clear work plan and a set of priorities. Since launching, they've driven several important initiatives, from a report on client-centered case management and a revised version of the National Salmon Outcome Standards, to the draft National Salmon Workforce Qualification Strategy, the sector theory of change, and new outcome indicators. And we're also progressing research to demonstrate these sectors' impact more effectively. As part of this work, SCOA is hosting a series of workshops to kind of gather some of the sector input on several of those key initiatives. So we've met so far twice, early in December last year, and look at workforce development. And this time we'll be having the third workshop, and we'll be looking at impact measurement and community engagement. This session will focus on enhancing community engagement and strengthening collaboration with other sectors. You'll hear updates from Working Group 2 and Working Group 3. So first, we'll hear from Clément Maroux, Settlement and Community Services Manager at Sidwest, and who is the chair of Working Group 2. This group has developed a community engagement framework that supports sustainable collaboration, inclusivity, and active participation with migrant and refugee communities. Alongside the framework, they've created a toolkit that is offering practical resources drawn from validated tools and best practices across the sector. So I'll leave the floor to Clément. Can you tell me more about that?
Thank you very much, Julie, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm Clement Meru, and I'm honored to be presenting the work of Working Group 2, which was tasked to develop a community engagement framework and toolkit that sets the minimum standards on how to engage with local migrant and refugee communities. I want to start by acknowledging the Darak people who are the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm joining this meeting. I want to acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are joining this meeting and extend that acknowledgement to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. As introduced by Julie, this is one of the working groups of the Road to Belonging. We were tasked to develop the community engagement framework. A lot of work has gone into this project, and I would like to thank the working group members who put a lot of effort into this. As if this is the second year of the project, and before going into that, I wanted to start by just highlighting a few remarks. The first thing is, SCORE and its members acknowledge that, funded services and, communities have an essential role in settlement of new arrivals and creating a sense of belonging in Australia. But it's also important to understand that, it's essential for settlement services to have infrastructure to support the settlement of newly arrived refugees. There's a mix of settlement funded providers, but sometimes ethno-specific organizations will also be funded to provide settlement services. And therefore, there's a limitation though, because if you have ethno-specific services providing settlement services, changes in settlement trends also mean that we need to be able to have some flexibility. And having that in mind, we started in early 2023, following the launch of the Road to Belonging strategy in late 2022. The development of the community engagement framework was guided by some principles for partnering with local and migrant communities. There was an acknowledgement of the unfunded work that was done by local refugee and migrant communities. There was also an acknowledgement of the importance of building the capacity of these communities in different jurisdictions, because the needs of communities in metropolitan and regional parts of Australia differs. Also, we were, as part of the work plan for this project, we focused on how SCORE could ensure that lived experience was embedded in its work, and with time that developed into the establishment of a lived experience advisory group, which now supports SCORE with its work, and it draws individuals, from refugee backgrounds as well. The acknowledgement of place-based approaches to engaging across the sector was also acknowledged, because, like I said, one community may be diverse in in ethnicity, but if you dig deeper, there are some subgroups within a particular group as well. So communities with intersectionality, for example, if you have an LGBTI group as part of an ethnic community, they need to feel that their needs are being met. So all of these were encompassed in the development of the community engagement framework. So with these guiding principles, we also move to the next stages, which is, consultation. Can you, the next? Yeah, so I kind of spoke about this. So the importance of, why we need, the framework, and why community engagement matters, enhanced service delivery is important. We also agreed that we needed, a tailored approach, like I mentioned, cultural appropriate support, and I mentioned the intersectionality and the diversity of groups, the importance of building trust. Cultural competence was also mentioned. So cultural humility. We agreed that funded providers needed to ensure that there was a trust of customs and cultures of communities. And there were elements of meaningful engagement and ensuring that, communities were well informed, so that they're able to support decision making. If we move to the next one. Yeah, so what happened before this, this framework was developed, we consulted with a number of groups, including young people. So we consulted, we approached Mayan, and Mayan supported SCORE in consulting with young people. We also consulted with LGBTI communities, and we also consulted with leaders from some ethno-specific groups out in Fairfield, and that was facilitated by all community services. And based on the information that we gathered, we then drafted a community engagement framework that was then tabled at the SCORE conference in Melbourne. And that was the end of 2023. So this is what was this is the final product, but before we came to this, we had to do some refining. There was some feedback from the conference on, and a lot of clarification was sought on, some of the wording and the appropriateness of the wording. And so the framework is highlights 5 pillars of how to engage, and we developed some descriptions on, under each pillar, how it should be used. So collaborating with ethno-specific examples, for example, you need to ensure that, there's consistency and consideration for community concerns. How you use it, this can be used when time allows for deeper engagement and ongoing network building. Partnering with, communities was also important, but it needs to be meaningful partnership. We also acknowledge that there could be some power imbalances, when partnering with communities, and therefore it was important to find a balance and ensure that, then communities, if you're partnering with them, then they feel that they are being listened to, they are involved in informing service delivery. Not only that, but they are also involved in shaping policies and programs. Informing communities, is a two-way process, and we need to make sure that as providers, we are able to inform communities, and also, if there are changes in laws and rules, it's important that there's that flow of information, but also to communities, but also from communities, because it's, yeah. Okay, so we developed this framework, but the framework itself, is not very useful unless it's guided by a toolkit. And this was the next stage of the development of this project. I think I spoke about this already, so let's move to the next one. So we started working on developing an online toolkit to guide the implementation of the framework. And this was the focus of the working group for the most of last year and early this year. What we did was engage a consultant to support us in developing the toolkit. The consultant also, we had some meetings where we, went into, a lot of discussion around, the scope of this toolkit, its security, its usability, and resource integration. The consultant Mohammed Yassin went and consulted with, with groups as well, especially ethno-specific organizations. And we also, thought of, okay, do we have case studies? And we gathered the case studies from the sector. But then we thought that, instead of gathering case studies, the case studies should be part of, the toolkit. So the toolkit allows you to search for resources based on the themes that were identified in the framework, and then you can refine your search, then refine your search, and it will provide you with a lot of resources, examples on how, you can involve, for example, or how you can consult, or how you can inform communities. So we then made sure that, okay, we agreed that, this toolkit would sit as part of the SCORE website, because we were thinking of, okay, long term, beyond the life of this project, how do we make sure that this continues to be a useful resource to the sector, or anyone who, is who wants to refer to this, and therefore Net shared a link to the SCORE page where you can locate the framework and the toolkit. So if you have time, you play around with it, go into it, you can search for the resources that you need. Actually, this is the very first time we are launching, this project to a wider audience. Most of the work has been done with the working group, but this is the very first time we are launching it to a wider audience, and it would be important to, if you have feedback on how we can improve, then we have some time on making improvements before presenting this again at the SCORE website, at the SCORE conference in November this year. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention in terms of evaluating, the impact of this piece of work. We thought that, SCORE could assess, its usage and impact through, website engagement data on the SCORE website, and also getting direct feedback from users. Measuring impact could be a challenge, but for us, the most important thing is the dissemination of the resources and the use of the resources that we've been uploaded there, in terms of maintaining, the information to ensure relevance. We also agreed that it would, eventually have to be managed in-house because the project has a limited time frame, but this will continue to be useful for the sector. So constantly, staff within SCORE, relevant staff within SCORE would be maintaining, the resources and removing any, resources that, are no longer relevant. I will stop here. And if there are any questions or comments, yeah, happy to take them. Thank you. So it's a lot of work. So over 2 years, and there's a lot of information. So unless it will take a while to digest the information, and then that might then trigger questions or comments. But if you have any feedback, please let us know. Is it Kate? What's the email address for? Can you drop the email address for receiving feedback in the chat box, or if there are any comments? Yeah.
Certainly, I'll put that in the chat now, but also there's a way to provide feedback directly on the web page, and maybe we should make it clear when you look at a resource, if there is anything there that you think shouldn't be there or is missing, there's a way to actually utilize the toolkit web page to provide us feedback as well.
Thank you.
Well, we can see that people are adding some comments in the chat.
Yeah.
People are like saying it's a great resource. And as Kate just mentioned, we encourage you to provide feedback either through the website or just reach out to SCOA, and please let us know anything you would like to add. Might give another minute or chance. Do you have any specific question, maybe, Clement, that you seeking feedback on, or how the people are using the tool, how we can help with promoting it?
I think for us, it's important that people actually engage with this with the framework and the toolkit. What's important is this is something we developed because there are a lot of community engagement frameworks out there, but this is one of a kind in Australia that is focused on the settlement sector, and we want to ensure that it's useful to the community, to the sector, and unless we get feedback, then we wouldn't know if it's useful or not. To everyone online as well, if you have some good examples of resources across the 5 thematic areas that we've mentioned, you can also email them to SCOA. Yeah.
I can see in the chat there's a question around the inclusion of First Nation in the toolkit. Do you want to answer that question, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, because the work of the settlement sector is limited to refugee and migrant communities, First Nations were not considered in this, but I'm sure that, there are other frameworks that are more effective in engaging with First Nations people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fema. Well, if there are no other question, well, we might move on. So thank you, Clément, everyone for participating in the chat. And again, I would like to encourage you to provide any feedback, reach out to SCOA at any time. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge all the significant effort and work that has been put into developing the framework and the toolkit. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, and yeah, we thank all of the members of the working group for that. Now, we're going to hear from John Jalajan from Curious Seekers, the CEO of Curious Seeker, and also the chair of Working Group 3. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so my voice is not at its best. But this group has focused on building good relationship with broader Australian society, including employers, government, and local communities. Well, they've been working in the last year on developing a set of targeted documents that are designed to explain what is the role of settlement sector and organization, and they provide practical guidance for engagement. These resources will soon be available, and today is about kind of introducing you and the sector to the resources and gathering your feedback on them. So I will leave the floor to John.
Thanks, Julie, and nice to see you, everybody. I have to confess, well, let me first start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are collectively meeting today. For me, it's Cammeraygal people, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I just want to acknowledge also I'm a little bit distracted. We had a team meeting before this, and one of my team members told me that last night they won the lotto. So they've won like the big power, $5 million. So everything that we talked about in our team meeting seemed a little bit less important after hearing that someone has won $5 million. So I'm still reeling a little bit. I started to cozy up to her, of course, to sort of talk about the depth of our relationship and friendship and how important she is to me. But anyway, so I'm a little bit distracted by that. Thanks very much for joining us today. Can I ask just one thing? I know this is a relatively long presentation. Everyone's online. Can I ask everyone to come off mute just for 1 second and just say hi, just say hello, just so I can hear some voices?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Fantastic. Thank you. Helpful. Thanks very much. Yeah, good to hear from you all. I'm going to do the screen share thing. My PowerPoint screen share doesn't work super well, so won't quite as pretty as Clement's, but you'll still be able to see it hopefully okay. So hopefully you can see, yeah, our slide here. And where I want to go to is, yeah, the point I want to start, hopefully you can see the Guardian screen. Is that coming up for you all? Ned, give me a thumbs up, or Julie a thumbs up. Yep, cool. Yeah, so I just wanted to start by framing up a little bit of what Working Group 3 is all about. So Working Group 3, our objective set at the beginning of the Road to Belonging strategy was connecting with other sectors and broader Australian society. So that's a massive scope for Working Group 3, connecting with other sectors, connecting with broader Australian society. So one of the things we're confronted with right at the beginning is just thinking about, well, what does that actually mean? What is actually achievable for Working Group 3? And to help shape that up, in our first couple of meetings, people talked about the Syrian refugee crisis that started in 2011 with the Arab Spring and really came to a peak 2015. Sadly, this is a continuing saga now, and events in Syria have again flared up in the past 6 or 12 months. So again, seeing large numbers of people from Syria being displaced. But in terms of Australia's awareness, I guess, of refugees and the refugee crisis, this really came to a head in 2015. And this is an extract from an article that was in The Guardian at that time. And first of all, I guess one point to make is how refreshing to think of a coalition government member of Parliament, Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer at that time, calling on the Prime Minister to increase the number of humanitarian intakes that the coalition government would take. So yeah, it was a time of a more collaborative approach, perhaps, to thinking about the plight of people from refugee backgrounds. And the Liberal government did respond by having a one-off significant increase in refugees from Syria. And there was a significant press awareness and public awareness of the plight of people from Syria, and a recognition of the need for people in Australia to try to do something to support. Again, positive times in terms of Australia's response to that crisis. This so shaped our thinking around what Working Group 3 was trying to do, because what people who were working in the sector at that time reported was they had so many people wanting to get involved. They had people volunteering, they had corporates reaching out to say, we want to get involved, we're aware of what's going on, we haven't been involved in this space before, how can we get involved? And we didn't have a good way to equip those volunteers and to equip and educate those companies to be able to bring them into the sector and to usefully support the work that the sector is doing. So this is a bit of a touchstone for the work of Working Group 3. So our objective is connecting with other sectors and broader Australian society, but how we are doing that is we're thinking about where there's fledgling interest in getting involved in the sector as a volunteer or as a corporate or as a member of the public. How can we better educate those people, welcome them into the sector, and then engage with them so that we can have them contributing in a useful way to the work of the sector. So keep that in mind as we go through here. That's the sort of the lens we've taken on thinking about the work of Working Group 3 and where we draw the line in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So with that said, what I want to do for about 20 minutes is talk a little bit about, the why we exist, tapping into people that are and companies that want to get involved. How do we communicate with those people better, engage those people, educate those people better? We're going to talk about what we've done so far in the first sort of close to 2 years of the Road to Belonging strategy, Working Group 3. Talk about where we are now, what we've achieved so far, and then what's next. So let me go down to just quickly in terms of the members of the Working Group 3 and myself. So my name's John Jelligan. I'm the CEO at Career Seekers. Here's the members of Working Group 3. Of course, at any given meeting, we tend to have around about 8 or 10 people, but generally a pretty good mix of people from these different organisations coming along to those meetings. So my background and what I guess qualifies for me to be in this area. So I've got a corporate background. So I worked for 20 years in the corporate sector with companies in London and Sydney. And then 10 years ago, decided I was passionate about wanting to do something that has a bit more meaning and impact. Got involved with the not-for-profit sector, initially at the Smith Family. I've always had strong belief in the power of meaningful employment to change lives. And Career Seekers is a small charity that supports people from refugee backgrounds to start professional careers in Australia. So I've got a good understanding of the corporate sector and why companies get involved. And Career Seekers, we spend our time trying to twist the arm of companies to get involved in supporting people from refugee backgrounds to obtain paid professional work. So the nice thing about our Working Group 3, we've got obviously great contributions from people who understand the sector, but also a good handful of people from John Holland, for example, and Primo Foods, and others that have got experience from the corporate world. I also want to acknowledge, so I'm the chair of Working Group 3 as of a couple of months ago. Esther, I've forgotten Esther's surname. Esther has a fantastic chair for the first couple of years. She's from Canterbury Council and has a long history, and a long history of involvement in the refugee community sector. So she's a fantastic chair. We've now swapped roles and she's the deputy chair of Working Group 3. And also to acknowledge the great support of the team from SCOA, The working groups come together to do some work from time to time, every 8 weeks or so, but then the SCOA team really stitch these things together and move things forward behind the scenes. So couldn't do it without the significant support of the SCOA team, Julie, Ned and others. So moving down to where do we get to? So this was what were we tasked with doing? This is our work plan as we set out on our journey. I want to focus today on what we've delivered. So 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, providing advice on how settlement programs can be optimized for cross-sector engagement. Develop materials that more clearly explain what the sector does. Identify existing best practice programs. And then 3.4 and 3.5 is what the future looks like. So first of all, there's some quick wins. So one of the things that was a no-brainer was to let's see examples of things that people are already doing in terms of engaging outside the sector, engaging with companies to support refugee employment, or engaging with volunteers to bring them in to support the work of a particular organisation. So we've gathered some case studies, 6 or 8 different case studies, and we've also articulated some principles that are core to effective cross-sector collaboration. So those case studies are available as a resource. There's a quick snapshot of 3 of them there. One, community refugee sponsorship. One is, one about career seekers. I wonder how that snuck in there. One about AMEP programs. So all good examples of where organisations who are in the sector have effectively engaged with either the corporate world or volunteers or other members of the public to support their work. So that was one of the first things we did. Took a while to pull these things together, but nevertheless a relatively quick win to get these case studies and these principles pulled together. I guess the next step from there was really wanting to think about what was the problem, what's the issue that we're trying to solve. I talked at the very beginning about how we sort of framed this problem. But even so, in some of our early discussions, we found ourselves jumping straight to some solutions like, let's create a website so we can put information on a website for members of the public to find. So we wanted to stop just before we raced into a solution. We want to stop and take stock and make sure that we were solving the right problem, in effect. So we were super fortunate to have PwC, the consulting firm, come on board and help us with, I guess, a design thinking approach to engaging with members of the sector and volunteers, community organisations, corporates, to get a better understanding of what the issues actually are. And from that, they come up with some really useful insights, identifying some areas where SCOA and the working group could lean into, and articulated a handful, 10 or so areas that made sense for us to focus on. And typically, they're in that space of engaging with corporates and engaging with volunteers. So I'm not going to go through in detail the work that PwC did, but just to really highlight the journey we've been on to consult with different stakeholders in this sector and to reflect on whether the direction we're going was the right direction, and then to give us some focus around what are the key areas that we lean into that would have the most benefit in terms of our overall objectives.
Interrupt you for a tick. We've got your screen. Could you go into presenter mode? For some reason, I can't access the chat. So are you able to change your screen to presenter mode?
Okay, just pausing for 1 second. I don't think that was directed at me. I think that was a bit of background noise.
It's directed.
Yeah, John, I think if you click, can you click on view, the tab at the top, and there would be a presenter mode, because it will make the slide bigger on the screen.
Does this help?
Oh, yes, awesome.
Yeah, sorry.
Perfect. Thank you.
My bad. So yeah, what I've put on this slide, this is a snapshot of 3 different slides out of the deck that PwC did. I'm not sharing this with you for you to digest the information. It's more making the point that there was considerable effort and reflection that went into thinking about the work of the working group and where we should focus our attentions and what was within scope and what was outside of scope. And indeed, this is probably some work, where we are now is what I would say is the end of the phase 1 of work. And I'll come on to this in a second. And we've now mapped out what's phase 2, what are we going to do for the balance of the 5-year road belonging strategy for working group 3. But this is probably a good opportunity for us to come back to this work and just reflect on what PwC, with our input, landed on or suggested as good topics for further consideration, and just sort of make sure that we're aligning the work that we've got on our work plan with the things that came out of this consultation exercise. So before I come onto that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop sharing this screen for a moment. And what I would like to come on to talk about is the other significant piece of work that we did. And so one of the pieces of, maybe just before I do that, just going back up here. So one of the significant things that we were going to do was to develop materials that more clearly explain what the settlement sector does and how the various actors can lend support. And the work from PwC came up and confirmed that, yes, this is a valuable exercise to do. So a significant amount of energy has been expended on developing these materials. So I want to take a couple of minutes to step through. Actually, I might ask one of you guys, Ned, could you share the employer one? I think that's probably the one most instructive one. So just while that's coming up, yeah, we've created, Andrew Cummings worked with the working group here to develop these documents. So there's 4 documents that have been produced. One that's a core document, one that's targeted at the general public, one that's targeted at employers, and one that's targeted at government and funders. So this is an iterative process over a number of months. Any of you that have been involved in drafting documents by committee and with lots of different stakeholders involved will know how challenging it is, but also how rich it is to then make sure you're getting the viewpoint of the settlement sector, but also from the corporate lens or from volunteers, and making sure we are adequately representing those views. So these documents have been finalised, but they are open for further comment. So if anyone has any suggestions about ways that these documents could be improved, then we'd always love to continue to enhance them. And again, so this one is the one that's targeted at, you can see targeted audience, employers and corporate. And thinking back to what I said right at the outset, what are we trying to do? What's the objective with these documents? It's thinking about, in this case, an employer that has a fledgling interest in getting involved with the settlement sector. So we're not thinking, we're not trying to go out and mark a list of people that aren't interested. We're thinking if someone who's got fledgling interest has reached out, what document could we provide that does a couple of things? One, gives sufficient context to them about the settlement sector so they can quickly get their head around how the sector works, but not get so overwhelmed that they're going to stop reading. So you need to keep it short and sharp for this target audience. And then secondly and thirdly, 2 other things, trying to get them thinking about what's in it for me? Why should I get involved? What's the benefit to my organisation to get involved? And then thirdly, the how to. So if you stick on the first page just for 1 second, Ned. So the first page is trying to provide some information as pithily as we possibly can to give context around what the sector is, a brief introduction, who are settlement providers and what do they do. Inevitably, that has to be pretty short and sharp because we're trying to keep it to 1 page because we know the corporate sector. I'm not going to read much beyond that, so enough context to hopefully make sense of the sector, but not to start getting bored. And then quickly moving on, if you could scroll down to the next page, please, Ned. Quickly moving on to saying, well, what's in it for you? So why should you get involved? Well, here's some benefits. This is an overlooked pool of talent, highly motivated group, often proficient in skills or language, bring new ideas and perspectives, so on and so forth. And if you go down a little bit further, Ned, again, here's some stories and some case studies about other organisations that have done this. That social proof thing. Companies are more likely to get involved if they think that others have done that. They're not the first organisation to go down this route. And also if they know that there's other organisations out there that can support them on this journey. And then the final bit, if there's one One area where we could do more, so this is still sort of some of the why to get involved. Just down a little bit further, please, Ned, is the how to get involved. So now trying to then, here's a summary of the sector. Here's why this is a good idea for you. You've expressed some interest in getting involved and involve the sector. Here's why you should do that, and now how can you take that forward in a tangible way? And probably this is the one area where I think there's a little bit more that we could do. How do you translate some fledgling interest into some tangible action? So we'll have connections here to how they can get in touch with settlement service providers. But yeah, I think there's maybe scope for us to be thinking a bit more laterally about how we could connect employers, or indeed volunteers, other members of the public, as the case may be, with relevant organisations, so they can turn an expressed interest into some tangible action. So I might just pause here for a second, because I've shared quite a lot of information with you at short order. Does anyone have any questions you want to ask or comments you'd like to share? You can either speak up, put your hand up, or put something in the chat if you'd like. Oh, thank you, Sue. That's a really good point, and I wish I'd thought of that at the time. I also wanted to say hi. So I just saw your note now. That's a super good idea. I'll take that on board for next time. And thank you, Fiona. I saw your we've got that presenter mode now. Terry, you.
Good morning. Yes, the last part where I work for the Centre for Culture, Ethnicity and Health, and trying to tell people how to do something. You really need a step by step. So you need 1, 2, 3, 4, do this, then do that, and you get there. So giving people links, no, people don't have time to go to a link and look at the how to do. That section of yours could be 1 page, but it could be a step by step. You can have a flow chart or something visual. Do this, do this, do this.
That's great feedback. That's great feedback. I think that, yeah, the idea of a flow chart super appealing. And I guess moving on to, yeah, please, if anyone has any other comments or suggestions, that's super valuable. Love to hear those sorts of feedback. Please put your hand up and I'll call on you. And just while people are thinking about that, I'm going to move on to talk about our next steps, because it ties in with what you said there, Terry. So there's a couple of bits that we've identified as where we're going to from here. So these documents are, I think they are ready for sharing. Ned and Julie will correct me if I'm wrong. Having said that, we recognise they're going to be evolving and being tweaked. So they're available available to be used now. So anytime and the SCOA team can share with you how they can make those available. Sean, did you have a comment?
Yes, John, we've been doing a lot of work. I'm the employment facilitator for the Southeast Melbourne and Peninsula region for Workforce Australia. So I'm involved with a lot of Afghan groups. We run professional medical group sort of to the side. We, in our own time, the focus is about the recognition of the qualifications, this whole deal. And it's nice to me telling you at Career Seekers how what you're dealing with. But my ongoing concern, obviously, is that there doesn't seem to have been a great deal of movement in this space. We're still working in small groups and trying to promote where we can to the government some changes in policy that will allow these people to fast track through into employment. I'm just wondering what where you're at with that.
Yeah, look, that's a really good call out, Sean. Look, in terms of this working group, that hasn't been a key focus of this working group. I guess we're more looking at the mechanisms of how we engage corporates, how we engage individual participants, volunteers. I mean, I do know, and you'll be aware, the work that SSI are leading around this on the $1 billion benefit. So I know from Career Seekers' perspective, we have joined forces as a signatory to that work and are sort of doing some joint advocacy with SSI. And I know they're consistently making representations to government about this. in terms of where SCOA sits on, in relation to this, I think that's probably something that's up to, if only we had the acting CEO of SCOA on the call who could perhaps, sorry, Julie, didn't mean to throw you into the bus there, but yeah, I don't know whether where SCOA sits in terms of advocacy on this particular issue. But yeah, I see it every day, Sean, in terms of the challenges that poses for people that have come here from refugee backgrounds to be able to start professional careers or skilled careers in Australia. Happy to talk some more about that offline in terms of the approach that Career Seekers takes, which is to finesse that issue. So feel free to reach out for that. You've probably got awesome experience as well, but happy to share anything that we do which might be relevant.
Thanks, John. We have had Career Seekers involved in some of the events that we've had in the past, so
yep.
More than happy to touch base again and follow through.
Awesome. So I'm going to keep moving on. Again, if people have things that they'd like to chip in or ask questions about, please just raise a hand and I'll call on you. And Julie, if you wanted to talk to, you may not, but if you want to, you can jump in.
Sorry, John, I had to step out for like a second and I missed your question. I'm happy if you don't mind repeating the question.
Yes, for sure. It was just about, Sean raised a great question about the challenges that people from refugee backgrounds face in terms of having their qualifications recognised.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about the work that SSI is doing, the $1 billion benefit, and Career Seekers approach to this. And I said, in terms of working group 3, it's, that sits outside at least as we frame things at the moment, sits outside the scope of this, but I didn't know if SCOA had a perspective on this issue more generally.
As you said, it's not really the scope of working group 3, but we do have working group 4, who's working on workforce and organizational capacity. And this group is looking at recognizing the skills and the competences of the workforce, and also supporting people who participate in the Salmon workforce into getting skills. And it's part of that is acknowledging the current skills, but also building and creating the space for learning and training and things like that. So we are developing a strategy, a qualification strategy that is kind of a policy and how we will could be implemented that with the Salmon sector to bring consistency in delivery, but also in supporting the workforce and participating in an active member of the workforce. So if I'm more than happy to have that conversation separately, you can email me, or also welcome to join Working Group 4 who's working on that.
Thanks, Julie. I wouldn't mind being involved in that Working Group 4, and I'll make contact with you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And thanks, Terry, am I pronouncing your name correctly? I'm sorry if that's, yep. For your question about including stories from people with lived experience, that's another great suggestion. So yeah, maybe Ned, if you wouldn't mind making a note of that one, I think that should definitely be, maybe not in the document, but it's as another resource that people could go to, because I think that can be super, super powerful. So that's a great suggestion as well. Thank you. So I'm nearing the end of what I wanted to share with you today. So we've talked a little bit about the context for what Working Group 3 is trying to do, thinking about companies that might be interested, volunteers that might be interested, public might be interested. How do we best engage with those people, bring them on the journey? Best practice case studies of things that have worked well in the past, some of the principles underpinning that, and then developing these materials to help engage those different different parts of society. And where we go to from now is a couple of key pieces. So one of the bits that's come up, having developed these documents, is this thinking about the communications plan or the communications strategy in relation to these documents. So it's all well and good to have these wonderful pieces of collateral that I think look fantastic and do what we want them to do, but then how do we use these effectively to reach volunteers and to reach corporates? So thinking about how we can make that work. That's always a tricky one. The world's a big place, so how do we reach out to the world? So we're still working through some of that sort of stuff. Just saw Andrea, you've got your hand up. Would you like to chip in?
Yes, hi. I'm Andrea from the Heart Foundation, coming to you today from Larrakia country in Darwin. And I was previously with Melaleuca Australia. I have a question just about the what do you call them? The brochures, the flyers I just saw up for employers. And I noticed that some of the language that was used was refugees and migrants rather than, say, people from refugee and migrant background. And I was wondering if that was a conscious choice in regards to, you know, if we also want to help companies to understand these are not, you know, they don't have one identity, people that are looking, you know, that have come here and looking for work, but they're also someone with a degree or someone, a family person, and things like that, whether that was a decision made or whether that hasn't yet been explored.
No, that's a good call out. I'm just looking at the hard copy that I've got in front of me. Yeah, I think that's probably something that we could, that's probably worth looking at those documents again, I think, with that in mind. I don't think at a SCOA level we've talked specifically about that language of refugees and migrants versus people from refugee or asylum seeking background. I know at Career Seekers we have, so we will always try and talk about people from a refugee background. So I think that probably is worth some further reflection in terms of making that language a little bit more people-centric, rather than, yes, trying to avoid using labeling sort of language. I think, is that from Andrea?
Yeah, especially because, I mean, you know, we kind of know what we mean, but for people that do not generally work or come in contact with people who have a refugee or migrant or asylum seeker background, you know, I guess that labeling inadvertently may keep them stuck in a certain box when we're trying to get them outside of that, and the employers outside of that way of thinking. And I wondered also if part of that might be to have a look at the imagery that's being used. And I know that at the Heart Foundation, we just happened to pay a lot of attention to that in our last year, because we used to, and we still do, use a lot of stock imagery that is kind of fits the bill, but is a bit general or generic, and often comes from America with kind of the American migrant culture on the pictures. And I wonder if there's access to maybe even some more specific imagery that really shows our local migrant and refugee communities. And I think that would be impactful as well to share our message.
There's some great feedback. And I think on the language thing, just skimming through the document now, I think in the vast, I mean, I've looked at this so many times now, so I've got to the point where I'm not sort of seeing it anymore, but I think that's a good call out. So we'll definitely review these documents with that in mind. And likewise with the imagery, yep, that's another really good pickup. So super helpful feedback. We'll take that away and give it some further reflection. Awesome. Okay, so time, we're not too bad. You're moving into next steps. So I talked a little bit about communications plan and communication strategy for these documents. That's feedback, by the way. Thanks very much, Terry, Andrea, and others. That's been super useful. If others have got thoughts, things you want to contribute, please chip in. It's definitely helping us to enhance and improve these documents. So really appreciate that. The other big thing that we've decided that we're going to focus on is more around the capacity building of the sector. So what's come up in the discussions that we've had is that this skill, if you like, of engaging effectively with corporates is one that is done well in certain pockets of the settlement sector, but not in other areas of the sector. Yet there's a demand for organisations in the sector to be doing this more effectively. So identifying, trying to think about, or thinking about how we can help the sector to build that capacity and build capability around engaging with corporates is something that will be really valuable to lean into. And in a similar way, and there is good experience around this area, is volunteer engagement. So AMEP being a prime example, but lots of areas, lots of situations where organisations operating in the sector are excellent at engaging, retaining, getting the most out of the volunteers. So is there something we can do to help the sector more generally to build capability and capacity in that area? And that capability building piece is a strength of SCOA's. So it feels like a natural home for Working Group 3 to be moving into, is thinking about that capacity building in terms of engaging with the corporate sector, engaging with volunteers. I think in terms of what I wanted to cover off, that's all I wanted to say today. It's just, let me check, there's a couple of other comments there. the language considerations. Yep, thanks very much, Donya. That's really helpful. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today. Happy to sit with this for a moment if there's any other questions. Maybe I'll throw back to you, Julie, to wrap things up.
Sure, well, we still have a bit of time, so if people have any more comments or questions they'd like to share, I'm seeing the same language. Well, we really welcome any comments, and this is exactly the purpose of this workshop today, is to seek your feedback. If you have further thoughts after we leave and close the meeting today, please again contact SCOA and let us know. What we will do then is incorporate the feedback into those documents, present new final design version, and we'll have those available on the SCOA website, and we'll be sharing it within the network, but we also encourage you to use those documents and share them. As John mentioned, we'll also be looking at developing kind of a capacity building packages that will go alongside those documents to make sure that when we develop resources, that they just don't sit on a website, but they are meaningful and being used. Once again, I want to acknowledge the awesome work of Working Group 3. That's another group who've been working super hard in the last year. It's just 4 pieces of documents, but it is a lot of work and a lot of thinking that has been through those documents. I want to thank everybody to joining us today. I can see there's a lot of people, and people have been participating, so that is great, and it's fantastic to see how many people are taking interest in today's session, and because it's a clear testament of the interest and commitment across the settlement sector for the Road to Belonging strategy. It kind of reinforces the shared belief that this strategy has the potential to drive meaningful change and lead to better outcomes for migrants and refugees across Australia. Well, today's discussion highlighted the 2 essential pillars of effective settlement work. First, the importance of ensuring that the voice of migrant and communities are heard and embedded in everything we do. And secondly, that we can only achieve lasting impact when we actively engage and collaborate with other sectors. We hope that you found this session insightful. And again, I thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and feedback. As your input is incredibly valuable. And like I said, we will be incorporating that, and we'll keep you posted on the progresses. So we encourage you to stay connected. Sorry, I'm...
Sorry. There's a question that's come up a couple of times in the chat.
Oh, yes.
We do. And I don't know the answer to this, but just want to let people know I'm not avoiding the question, but who is checking on people who are migrants and refugees who might get lured into modern slavery? So it's a good question. I don't have the answer to it, but I just wanted to make people clear that we're not avoiding it. Just I don't know what the answer is. And again, I think in terms of the work of Working Group 3, which is about how do we better engage with volunteers, how do we better engage with corporates. It's not something we've specifically considered. So it's hard for me to, happy to take it away and give it some further reflection. Is the concern that maybe we're trying to engage employers to get more involved with the sector by offering employment opportunities, so therefore we need to be managing the risk of people being lured into modern slavery? Is that the nature of the concern? Who is that from? Farida? Oh, in the mining sector. Okay.
Hi. Yes, this was in our experience, there is people who mention this thing, and that there has been people are exploiting migrant and refugee background workers, especially in the mining area. They kind of deal with them like second or maybe third class citizen or maybe people. So it's really concerning, and also people who are coming or as a parent to look after their grandchildren. So this has been witnessed also, that there are things happening in that area too, and maybe need a bit of attention in that area. Thanks.
Okay, that's a super good point. Thank you for raising. Don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head, but definitely something we should be thinking about if we're looking to engage employers in the work of the sector more, then there's arguably a responsibility to be educating those employers about what's acceptable and what's not. Although, yeah, it's unfortunate. That sounds like just pure exploitation. And rather than, anyway, definitely something to take on board. So yeah, thank you for raising and for sharing. And sorry, Julie, you were wrapping
Yes.
up.
Sorry, I was I had closed the chat, so I didn't see that coming. But yeah, again, I want to emphasize what John said. Like, it's something that we don't have a clear answer now, but it's something that we'll consider, and we can add definitely into the thinking of how we use those documents, because we do want to encourage engagement, but at the same time, it's good to, again, in the capacity building piece of like making sure that when we do it, that we do it in an informed way, and that it's also it goes both ways, that we make sure that it's also done safely. So we'll take those consideration, and we'll happy to share back our thoughts. Again, we'll be having, SCOA tries to have a regular updates with the sector on the work of the working group. So happy to, again, engage with us, and we also can report back on that. Yeah, so we're kind of reaching the end of today, our session. So just want to, once again, thanks everyone for coming. Like I said, we really value your feedback. I hope you had and learned a fair bit about the work of the working group 2 and 3. We'll keep you posted with more updates on how the Road to Belonging strategy in general is progressing. And as we've done before in the webinar, we also encourage you to join any of the working groups you have an interest in. We've dropped in the chat the link for the Road to Belonging email address. Reach out to any of us if we can help, if we have any question about the strategy. And yeah, once again, thank you again for your time and your ongoing contribution. Well, we look forward to working with you again and continuing our beautiful journey as part of the Road to Belonging strategy. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.